The Emperor's Nightingale. Long, long ago, in the days when to wish was to have, there lived a great and learned emperor. He was the high and mighty emperor of all China. This high and mighty emperor lived in a palace made entirely of porcelain. It was the finest palace in the world, and the gardens surrounding the palace were the most beautiful ever seen. They were so large that even the 100 gardeners who attended them had no idea where they began and where they ended. They contained flowers of the rarest variety, and the green woods and deep forests were full of magnificent trees and flowering shrubs of breathtaking beauty. The emperor had so many rare and costly possessions that writers and poets came from all parts of the world to see with their own eyes the marvels of his palace and gardens. When they returned to their own countries, they wrote books and poems about what they had seen. Now, this high and mighty emperor, whose smallest wish was law, was so grand that even his most important ministers did not dare speak in his presence until he had given them permission. And even then, they only said things which they knew would please him. This meant that the emperor knew very little about what was really going on. He did not know, for instance, that in all the books written about himself, his palace, and his gardens, more pages were devoted to describing the song of a small brown bird than to his rare pictures and priceless art treasures. This brown bird, this little nightingale, wrote one author, has a song so beautiful that it is worth all the treasures of the high and mighty emperor of China put together. If the fishermen who lived by the edge of the sea and who were often lucky enough to hear the nightingale sing, could have read all that was said about the little brown bird, they would have agreed with every word. The emperor, of course, knew nothing of the nightingale, and the courtiers and all those who lived in the palace knew nothing of the bird, for they had no liking for walking, and the woods were a long way from the palace. One day, the emperor received a gift from the Emperor of Japan. The Emperor of Japan was almost as famous as the Emperor of China, and between the two emperors, there was a great deal of jealousy and envy. The Japanese emperor had sent the Chinese emperor a book in which it clearly stated that the finest treasure belonging to the emperor of China was the nightingale of the woods. "What's this?" exclaimed the high and mighty one as he all but tumbled off his golden chair. "A nightingale in my gardens, and I have not heard of it. And to think I must learn of its presence from a book." Then he rose to his full height and called for his minister-in-chief, who came at a run, for he dared not keep his lord and master waiting a single moment. "What nightingale is this?" cried the emperor. "Where is it? Why have I not heard of it before? You may speak." "I know nothing of this bird," said the minister-in-chief, trembling visibly. "It has certainly not been presented at court. I have not seen the name in the honorable scroll of famous names." "It is written in this book which the Emperor of Japan has sent me," said the Emperor, "that this bird is the most wonderful treasure I possess, and I know nothing about it. Bring me this bird tonight so that I may hear its song for myself. I do not know where to look for this nightingale," stammered the poor minister. "I want it. I will have it," cried the Emperor. "And if you fail to bring it to me, you will lose your head, and the court will eat boiled rice for a year." With such a threat hanging over him, the minister-in-chief wasted no time. He trotted through the long passageways and corridors, squeaking at the top of his thin voice, "Has anybody seen the nightingale? Who knows about the nightingale? A jay ring to the man or woman who can bring me news of the nightingale's whereabouts." But none of the ladies in waiting or the courtiers had heard of the bird, and it was only when he went down to the kitchens that he had any luck. "If you please, honorable sir," said one of the kitchen maids, "I know about the nightingale. Whenever I have to visit my poor sick mother who lives in one of the villages, I take a short cut through the woods, and when I am tired, the little brown nightingale cheers me up with its song. You shall make the Emperor's a special chocolate cup if you take me to the place where the bird sings," promised the minister, stroking his long white beard in great delight. "I will see to your promotion myself." Then, with other ministers, he went to the Emperor and daringly spoke without being spoken to, saying, "High and mighty Emperor, we have found the bird. We shall bring this nightingale to you this evening." Then the minister-in-chief and his council and 3/4 of the court went into the gardens, and the maid led them deep into the woods. The ladies and gentlemen of the court knew so little of the countryside that when they heard a cow lowing, they mistook it for the nightingale. "No, no," the kitchen maid told them. "That noise is the noise a cow makes. My nightingale's song is so sweet that when you hear it, you will want to weep for joy." "I think I can hear it now," cried one of the page boys suddenly. "No, that's the croaking of frogs," the kitchen maid told him sharply. "Now be silent, if you please, for we are drawing near the tree where the nightingale lives." Suddenly, as the long processions made its way through the trees, the sound of a singing bird was heard, and the kitchen maid whispered, "There! Listen! It's my nightingale. Is not the song beautiful?" "Yes, yes, very nice," the minister replied, peering up into the trees. "But what a plain, unremarkable bird it is! Dear me! I expected something more. More. What shall I say?" "Shall I speak to it?" asked the maid. "Tell me what you want with it." "Tell the nightingale that the high and mighty Emperor of China wishes to hear its song," said the minister in a lordly fashion. "Dear little nightingale," said the maid, "will you please sing for the high and mighty Emperor of all China?" "Certainly," replied the nightingale, and it opened its mouth and began to sing again. Its song was so enchanting that it moved even the stout ladies in waiting, who were by now quite out of breath and very tired. "Charming! Charming!" exclaimed the minister. "But your emperor is not here. He desires that you come to the palace and sing for him this evening." "I sing best in these green woods," said the nightingale, "but if my emperor commands it, I will come to the palace and sing for him tonight." On hearing this, the minister led the procession back to the palace and gave orders that the great hall should be richly decorated with flowers and silver bells. The emperor's golden chair was placed in a position close the window where the nightingale would sing, and a perch of solid gold was made ready for it. All the courtiers were told to wear evening dress, and the kitchen maid was given permission to be present, providing she could find a suitable hiding place behind one of the pillars. She too was instructed to wear her very best clothes and to make sure her hair was brushed and her hands were clean. When the hall was so bedecked with garlands of flowers and trailing vines that it looked like some exotic garden, the emperor was informed that all was in readiness for the nightingale, and he came and sat down on his golden chair to await the arrival of the bird. The little brown bird did not keep the mighty emperor waiting, but came almost at once. It sat on the golden perch which had been made ready for it, and it sang so gloriously that tears came into the emperor's eyes as he listened. The emperor was so overcome by the wonderful sweetness of the bird's song that he could scarcely find words to thank the nightingale. When, at last, he could speak, he said, "Take this golden slipper of mine and wear it round your neck as a mark of my gratitude." "I seek no reward," said the nightingale. "I saw tears in your eyes as I sang." "Your tears were enough to thanks for me." And it sang again, so sweetly and yet so joyfully that many of the court ladies resolved to stop gossiping and be kind and generous to everyone. "You shall remain here in my court," the emperor told the nightingale. "You will have your own golden cage and sing for me whenever I ask you to." "My song sounds sweeter in the green woods," said the nightingale, "but the emperor has spoken and I cannot deny his wishes." "It is not my intention to make you a prisoner," said the emperor. "I shall not take away all your freedom. You shall go out twice every day and once at night into the gardens and the woods, but your home is here in the palace." The nightingale said no more, and only the little kitchen maid understood the sadness the brown bird of the woods must be feeling. But She was too young and unimportant to expect anyone to pay attention to her, and so she remained silent, and the nightingale became the most important member of the court. Soon, news of the nightingale spread throughout the land, and in every eating palace and on every street corner people talked about the wonderful bird, and some parents chose to name their children after him. The nightingale sang for the high and mighty emperor at least 6 times each day, and the emperor never seemed to grow weary of its sweet singing. True to his promise, he permitted his favorite to visit the gardens and wood twice every day and once at night. 12 of his servants were appointed to accompany the nightingale when it went out, and each one held a silken thread which was fastened to the bird's legs. The servants held the threads very tightly, for they knew if they allowed the emperor's nightingale to escape, they would almost certainly lose their heads. The nightingale no longer enjoyed the woods, for the threads held it fast, and it could no longer fly into its favorite tree. But it did not wish to offend the emperor or hurt his feelings, so it put up with these outings and even sang once or twice to please the crowds who watched at a respectful distance the procession through the gardens and the woods. One day, the emperor was surprised to receive another gift from the Emperor of Japan. Before opening it, he examined the parcel with interest, for on it was written just one word: Nightingale. "Huh!" he exclaimed. "This must be a book in praise of my magnificent little songster." But the emperor was wrong, for when the parcel was opened, it contained not a book, but a small box, and inside this box sat the most exquisite mechanical bird ever seen. The tiny nightingale was studded with diamonds, rubies, and sapphires. Its sparkling beauty drew gasps of deep admiration from the minister-in-chief and his friends, and the high and mighty emperor smiled a smile of deep pleasure at the magnificence of his gift. By means of a small golden key, the gorgeous bird was wound up, and it began to sing. As it sang, its tail moved up and down, which quite enchanted the watching emperor. Much later, when the glittering bird had sung its song over and over again, a message written in tiny regular letters was discovered in the box, which said, "The Emperor of China's nightingale is poor compared to that of the Emperor of Japan." This did not please the emperor, but he hid his annoyance and said that the two birds must sing a duet together. Now, the brown bird of the woods sang a different song each day, and the mechanical bird sang only the same songs over and over again. It is not very surprising then that the duet was not a great success. It is certainly not the fault of your beautiful jewel bird. "Your Imperial Majesty," said the head parcel ringer, because he considered it is his duty to defend the artificial nightingale. It is the fault of the brown bird of the woods. It cannot make up its mind which song to sing. So then, the mechanical bird was made to sing again, and it sang the same songs some 30 times before stopping. "Why, it sings as sweetly as the brown bird!" exclaimed the minister-in-chief, stroking his long white beard. "So it does," echoed the other ministers, and one even dared to say, "If you ask me, I really prefer the song of the mechanical bird, and it is so entrancing to gaze upon." "Let me hear once again my own nightingale's song," said the emperor, who seemed quite fascinated with his gift. "It is only fair." But when they turned to the perch, the little brown nightingale had flown away through the open window and into the green woods which it loved. The high and mighty emperor did not send his servants to catch the bird. "Let it go," he said indifferently. "I have this fine, handsome nightingale, 1,000 times more attractive than the plain brown nightingale to gaze upon. It shall sing to me every hour of the day, and I shall never grow tired of listening to it." The emperor ordered that his precious nightingale be shown to the people, and that from now on no mention be made of the woodland bird, who was not clever enough to repeat the same song twice. And the people, all except the little kitchen maid and the fisherman, declared that the artificial nightingale's songs were much more delightful than those of the plain brown nightingale of the woods. After some weeks, the high and mighty emperor was so enchanted with his glittering toy that he ordered the bird be placed on a silken cushion and kept at his side. Day and night, the nightingale must always be close to him, so that whenever he chose, he could turn the key and hear again its sweet lilting voice. Once, and very stupidly, one of his least important ministers mentioned the brown bird of the woods in the emperor's presence. He did not get his head chopped off, but he was informed that he had committed a breach of court etiquette, for the bird had been banished from the palace, and its name could not therefore be mentioned. Presents of jewels, gold, and silver began to arrive at the palace for the emperor's nightingale, and once a month the emperor permitted his people to view his court favorite and to admire the presents. They were also informed that the nightingale was to be known throughout the land as the high imperial after-dinner singer, and must on no account be spoken of as a mere mechanical toy. For a whole year, the high imperial after-dinner singer continued to sing and twitter until the court knew each one of its songs by heart. So too did the tradesmen and the messengers who came to the palace, and they were able to whistle the tunes without striking a single wrong note. One evening, the nightingale was singing at its loudest and sweetest. Something really dreadful happened. There was a whiz and a crack all its tiny wheels began to race round, and then the singing stopped abruptly. The emperor at first did not really understand what had happened to his beautiful bird. He sprang from his couch and picked it up, turning it over in his hand, beseeching it to sing for him once more. But the bird could not sing. Some of its parts had worn out and required attention. In considerable distress and alarm, the emperor summoned his minister-in-chief. "Do what you can for my little songster," ordered the emperor. "You are a man skilled in many arts. I command you to make the bird sing once again." The minister-in-chief examined the bird from every angle, and then, with great delicacy, he began prodding it gently with a screwdriver. He found a screw that had worked itself loose, and he tightened it. He tightened other screws in case they too had come loose. But all the time he worked on the bird, he had the emperor's eyes upon him, and his hand trembled, and his repairs were less skillful than they might have been. At last he said, "High and mighty emperor, your songbird will sing again, but it must be given long rest. I would advise that it sings only once a year." When it became known that the emperor's nightingale was out of sorts and so could not sing, loyal subjects came from all over the city to gaze at the summer house where the jeweled bird was resting. The emperor's grief at the state of his songster's health became their grief, and so the grown-ups wore sad and sober expressions, and the children were not allowed to sing or dance in the streets. The messengers and tradesmen, who for many months had whistled and hummed the glittering nightingale's songs, were forbidden to do so, and throughout the palace itself all was gloom. People came daily to inquire after the nightingale's health, and the answer was always the same: "The high imperial after-dinner singer will have no song to sing until the end of the year." The end of the year was a very long time in coming, and when it did, all the people asked themselves and each other if the artificial nightingale would sing once again for the emperor. The day it was lifted from its little box and set on its golden legs was declared as a public holiday. But before the emperor was allowed to wind it up with the golden key, the chief watchmaker was called in, and he examined every tiniest part of the dazzling bird with the utmost care. "What do you think?" whispered the minister-in-chief. "Will it or won't it?" "It will," said the watchmaker. "The bird will sing, but His High and Mighty Majesty must be content with just 3 songs." Then the bird was placed on its silken cushion close to the emperor's golden chair, and the emperor wound it up with loving gentleness. How wonderful it was for him to hear the sweet, happy songs once again, and to watch the pretty tail with its rubies and sapphires move up and down, up and down. For the first time for many months, the emperor lost his tired, sad look, and began to smile. Then the watchmaker warned the minister that he must not allow the emperor to ask too much of the bird. But the emperor could not bear to have the nightingale's songs cut short, and so he wound it up again and again, until there was a sudden ominous crack and a whirring of wheels, and the nightingale stopped in the middle of one of its best songs. The watchmaker was quickly brought to the bird, and being more accustomed to dealing with tiny wheels and springs and delicate mechanism than the minister-in-chief, was able to repair the bird well enough to satisfy the emperor. "The bird will sing again for you tonight, your imperial majesty," said the watchmaker. "But though you may consider my words out of place, I must warn your imperial majesty that its singing life is drawing to a close. I have studied it carefully through my magnifying glass, and there are parts which are wearing out and cannot be replaced." "I will listen to its song once more," replied the emperor sadly, "and then give orders that my nightingale be rested, not for 1, but for 5 years." Now 5 years is a very long time to wait for something, and the emperor was already growing old. He missed the sweet singing of his nightingale so much that he lost interest in his other treasures. He grew absent-minded and frail, and the affairs of state and the happiness of his subjects were no longer his first concern. Long before the 5 years were up, the high and mighty Emperor of China had become a sick man. He was so weak that he could not walk in his beautiful gardens, or enjoy any of the sumptuous dishes which were sent up from the kitchens. When the news of his ill health reached the ear of his people, the whole country went into mourning, for they loved their emperor and trusted in him. The fate of the artificial singing bird became unimportant. No one even bothered to mention the nightingale, and no parents named their children after it. At last, the ailing emperor took to his bed and lay there, a pale shadow of his former self. Hoping to comfort him, his ministers took the nightingale out of its box and laid it on the silken cushion beside the emperor's bed, and one, more optimistic than the others, wound up the gold bird with its little key. "Sing! Sing! Sing for your high and mighty emperor!" the minister urged. But the mechanical nightingale could only produce a single, ugly, highly pitched squeak before collapsing on the cushion. So that was the end of the diamond and sapphire bird, and the emperor seemed to lose all desire to live. He lay so stiff and cold in his bed that the court decided he had only moments to live. Nothing could rouse him, and indeed, Death himself, with a crown on his head and a sword in his hand, came and sat on the poor emperor's gorgeous bed. Both the crown and the sword belonged to the emperor, as did the splendid yellow banner, and now Death had taken them. Soon he meant to take the emperor too. The emperor roused himself a little when he saw Death waiting for him. Music, music, he whispered. Sing for me, my little jeweled bird. Have I not showered you with presents of silver and gold? But the little mechanical bird was broken and could not sing, and Death continued to stare at the emperor. Suddenly, there came through the open window the sweetest and loveliest of songs. The nightingale of the woods had returned to sing to his emperor, and as it sang, Death slowly took off the crown and laid aside the sword and the banner before drifting, like a cold grey shadow, out of the window. Thank you, my own dearest bird, whispered the emperor. How can I reward you? Your tears are reward enough, said the nightingale. I want nothing more. Now I will sing to you until you fall asleep. In the morning, when the ministers tiptoed in the royal chamber to gaze at their dead emperor, they found him sitting up in bed, alive and well, and able to greet them most cheerfully with a loud good morning. The end.